Hey guys, it's Sam here from Chalice and Chains. And today I just wanted to, excuse me, do a video talking about complexity in RPGs and whether or not it is sort of required to make a game really good or make the gaming experience really good, if it's necessary to have a quality RPG. This has been something that I've been thinking about a little bit lately, based on a couple of things. One, I just got a copy of Basic Fantasy Role-Playing, which so far I'm loving. And I also have been really digging into White Box, Fantastic Medieval Adventure game. Both of these are sort of OSR clones that are very rules light. Now, Basic Fantasy has a little bit more rules than White Box, I think, because White Box is based kind of on original D&D, where Basic Fantasy is sort of it's not even necessarily a retro clone, but it's taken 3rd edition D&D and really pared it way down to sort of emulate that feel of old school D&D. And I've been really looking for something like this because I've been playing 5th edition D&D, right? Which is significantly less complicated than, let's say, I don't know, 3.5, Pathfinder, whatever. But it still has a lot. It's still complicated, right? And so what I find interesting is I'm leaning towards less complicated games as my preference. However, I love the Star Wars Fantasy Flight Games role-playing game. And that is by no stretch of the imagination a simple game. That is a very complex game. It's got a lot of subsystems that I think are well worth it, and they do a good job of helping to facilitate the entire purpose of that game, which is that heavy narrative style game. So that's a game in which I think the complexity really does the game justice, right? It's explained well, the subsystems all fit well together. And I think that they create an atmosphere or an experience of, whatever. Scott Garibay. Oh, hey, what's up, man? Let me see if I can read your comments here. I'm on my phone, so let's see. Short answer, yes. However, the best games mask complexity well and control how complexity impacts different. Yeah, Fate is 50 pages long with a clean rules system, but I think it is complex. Yeah, so I'll get into that in a minute too. So what's interesting is Marquis Hartis of A Point of Inspiration posted something on Facebook about complexity and how he kind of thinks that it is a good thing in games. The supplement that he's creating, Subari, which is going to be kind of a Arabian Nights themed supplement for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, or at least based on the OGL, but it's going to be different, right? He's completely reworking the magic system. It's really cool. I got a chance to play test it, and it's flavorful. It's really great. But it is complex. It is more complex than base 5e, right? It adds things like social dueling and rules for that. It adds rules for things like exploring the cosmos and using the environment around you to do things, right? Kind of replacing magic and stuff like that. There's rules for, smokes and potions and, the hookah and all kinds of kind of cool subsystems in there. And it's really neat. I think that it is going to be a very flavorful game. But what's interesting to me is, will that be a game that is suitable for someone to pick up and run as a one-shot, or in a system, or in a situation where it's like, hey, I've got time to run a game, let's play something, I would say probably not. Because one of the other things that Marquis said in that post was that when you have system mastery, right, when you've taken the time to really learn the rules, you've taken the time to understand how things are done, that will enhance your gaming experience. And I agree with that. I do completely agree with that. But I think that gaming now in 2017 has gotten to a point where it's harder and harder to sit down and schedule those 4 to 6 hour games every week, right? Sometimes having a consistent game at all is difficult. I think we're also living in an age right now where people have so much access to so many different systems and they have so much access to so many different groups that sometimes people aren't content to play one system. I know I'm not. I get antsy when I play one system for too long. So for me, system mastery is very difficult because I don't have the time to sit down and read through the entire Edge of the Empire core rulebook. And I wish I did, because I think that it's really good. Scott's saying the problem with system mastery is you can get major differences between the level between each player that can cause a lot of problems. Yeah, and I think a lot of it is to do with the GM and system mastery. So, you know, there's that. But yeah, I prefer sort of one system for system mastery as well. But I think that what I'm finding is that right now, the type of gaming that I can do tends to be when my schedule is available, right? I can sometimes do a weekly game. Sometimes I can do a bi-weekly game, whatever. But two things that I've noticed: I can't game for more than 4 hours at a time because typically I have to game after my kids go to bed, which means that I'm gaming late into the night. I also don't want a long game, a long campaign, because there's so many systems out there that I want to try. And third, I prefer running games over playing games. I typically enjoy, I get more enjoyment from being the game master normally than I do from being a player. As of late, I've been very much enjoying being a player in my friend Alan's games. He's run some Fate games and some other games that have been really fun. And I've gotten to play in some other games as well, including a playtest of Marquis's game. And they've all been really fun. I've had a great time. But for the most part, I like to DM. And so I don't have the time to master a system. As a player, I don't mind jumping into a system and saying, hey, I'll play this as a one-shot, or maybe I'll play it as a trilogy. You know, if I don't have the book or I don't have the time to master the system, I'm just going to role play, right? Because that's what I can do without knowing all the rules. And I'll just ask the GM, hey, how can I do this? But for me, when I'm running the game and I have a player do that, I don't want to have to slow down, take a look through the book and say, hold on, there's a rule for this, right? Now, had I been someone who had been able to sit down and read through the whole book, I may have been able to already know, okay, yep, there's a rule for that, this is how it goes, whatever. I don't have the time to do that. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of people these days don't have the time to do that anymore. You know, I mean, so what do you do, right? So does it make sense in 2017 to have a game that has a lot of complexity to it? Have a game that has a lot of, you know, subsystems and rules and whatever, because it will be an enhanced game experience, right? Or does it make sense to do something like they did with a lot of the rules light games, which is to say, here's the basic set of rules. But the most important thing is, as the GM, you decide what you want to use and what you don't. We're going to give you a framework and you roll with everything else. Now, some people would suggest, well, you can do that with complex games as well. And yeah, you can. But I know for me, my problem with that is that if a rule is in a book, I assume that that rule was put there for a reason. I assume that the author of that game thought that that rule should be used because it's important, that it will help enhance the gameplay experience, right? So I want to try to use that. And if the players have the book and the players have read through the rules, they probably know that rule and are probably expecting it as well. Or maybe they don't know the rule, but whatever. You know, they may very well expect you to play rules as written. So I kind of want to do that, right? I mean, if the author thinks that that rule makes sense for the type of game that they designed, I want to honor that. You know, I want to try that out. But sometimes I don't like those rules, or I don't have time to read all the rules, right? And so what I'm finding is that I have a lot of fun just running a game on the fly, really focusing on the story and the characters, and just make rulings instead of rules. That's what draws me to OSR games, right? So, but what do you do? I mean, you know, Scott mentioned that Fate, while it looks like and sometimes is billed as a rules-like game, it really isn't. When you really start digging into the mechanics of how Fate works, there's not a lot of rules, but it is a system that if you are playing it by the book, you end up interacting with the rules of the game a lot. You know, one of the criticisms of Fate that I've heard, and that I think is legitimate, is that Fate has a very player-facing mechanic, right? Fate is something that puts these rules in front of the player, not the character, and forces the player to interact with them, right? In terms of spending fate points and invoking boosts or aspects or whatever on the scene. So, you know, that can be something that can be challenging or troubling. But what's nice about Fate is that the rules applications are very simple. It's just trying to figure out how to, you know, what the name of this boost is, or what the name of this aspect is, or how can I invoke or compel this thing, right? But you basically have 4 actions, right? You're either attacking, you're defending, you're trying to overcome something, or you're trying to create some kind of advantage. And everything revolves around that. So in that sense, it's pretty light. Star Wars role-playing game is similar in the sense that everything is based around a skill check, and you add narrative elements based on the dice, right? So at its core, just like D&D, just like any other system, it's a skill check system. But there's a lot of subsystems that come into play. And those work really well in that system. They flow very well. But, you know, does that complexity add something to the game? Does it make it better? I don't know if it makes it better, because frankly, I've run a lot of Star Wars. I enjoy it a lot, and I don't use all of the rules. I don't particularly enjoy the space combat rules, for example. I think that they're a little bit more complex than I like. And even though it's narrative, it still gets a little crunchier than I would like. So this brings me back to D&D 5e, because 5e was the game that I started running when I got back into role-playing in late 2014, early 2015. Thanks in part largely to the online gaming that I've seen online, including things like the Provokers and Dawnforged Cast's games and stuff like that. I was like, wow, this is cool. You know, this is not 3.5, which I had been used to and didn't like. It was a definitely more narrative style of game. But I started playing it, started running it, and I was getting frustrated with it because I would, you know, create a 3rd level character, and they would have 9 abilities. They would have 9 or more things that I had to keep track of. You know, there were archetypes, there were racial feats, there were background feats, there were, you know, and feats the wrong term, but you know what I mean. If you had spell casting, that was a whole nother system that would add complexity, and then you'd have to know all the spells. And some of the spells had very detailed descriptions and how they would work and whatever. And so here I am playing in a game with a 3rd level character, looking over my character sheet, being like, holy crap, like, what am I going to do? And I'm a veteran DM. I know not to do this, and I still fell into the trap of looking to my character sheet to decide what I could do versus being in the moment and reacting to the fiction and then allowing the fiction to determine what I do, and then hopefully using something on my character sheet to add to that or enhance that, right? So, God forbid, I have to play 10th level, 12th level. Like I'm not going to play a high level game of D&D. I just don't, because it's too complex for me. I don't want to do it. It's and some people like it, and I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying for me, I can't do it. I just cannot. I don't have fun. And what I end up doing when I'm running games is I go very narrative. I heavily pare down things, right? Which really for me means I should run Fate or Dungeon World or something. But I'm looking at basic fantasy, right? And I'm looking at the fighter in particular. And in basic fantasy, the fighter has no special abilities, right? I mean, literally they have higher hit points. They can wear any kind of armor and use any kind of weapon. That's it. Clerics can turn undead and can cast spells. Magic users can cast spells and read magic. Thieves can backstab as well as all of their thieving abilities, right? But I mean, that's it, right? And the fighter's got nothing, And so to me, that's kind of appealing, because what that means is that you have to make your character special. The player, not some abilities that the book thinks are important, right? When you're a 4th level hero in basic fantasy, you're a hero of the realm, but you're still a pretty normal person. You just have survived things and have amassed wealth and riches and experiences that the rest of the world hasn't, right? You're not a superhero. Okay? Now, if you're a mage or you are a cleric, you're fairly powerful at that point. Even at 4th level, I mean, you don't have a ton of spells, but considering what the rest of the world is like, you're probably well known. By 10th level, you're building, theoretically anyway, you're building, temples and castles and guilds and towers and whatever. You're getting involved in a much larger sort of bird's eye view of the game, which is great. That's not what modern D&D wants you to do, right? Modern D&D lets you go up to level 20, and it's all focused on your character, at least in the book, right? It doesn't go beyond. It doesn't go to those world, political things where, you might be dealing with an angry duke whose land you basically went into to raid this dungeon, and you've come out with all this treasure, and now the duke wants a cut of that treasure because it was on his land. But the land that you're from and the king that you support, or the baron or whatever, the count, the duke, he's basically said, yeah, keep the treasure, you've done a great job, this, that, and the other, right? In OSR games, you're hiring, mercenaries and soldiers and hirelings to go in with you. You're building castles and you're hiring mercenaries and you're doing all this stuff at higher levels that is just unheard of in modern D&D. Now that is a level of complexity, isn't it? But it's not so complex that you have to be like, hold up, I need to look at the book and decide what I'm going to do here. I think I'm going to end it there. I know Dark Age had been looking at Savage Worlds, and that game is complex. Like, people, they call that a rules light. They don't call it rules light. It is a complex system, and it is one that I share a lot of his concerns with, in the sense that it was built around miniatures. You don't have to play it with miniatures, but man, there are a ton of subsystems and extra rules and things, auto fire and all these different systems. So I've yet to try it. I want to try that, but I'm concerned that the complexity of that game, for me, will be a detriment. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, on complexity. And I'm sorry, guys, if I didn't address all of your comments. I'm on my phone, and it's doing Facebook Live on your phone is weird. the comments disappear and I don't really know how to get them back. So, so I do apologize there. But thank you guys for sticking with me. Let me know what your thoughts are, and happy gaming.